Hey, everybody. How you doing? Welcome. It is Wednesday, October 30th, 2024, and this is Shadow at Night. Thank you for being here. So, is voter fraud already happening in the United States on the advance polls? We have some video today that I'm going to show you that makes it certainly look like it. And I'm kind of wondering if election officials are involved in this and police officers as well. The Democrats, it looks like, are bald-faced cheating. The Republicans filed an injunction, and they had it granted within 24 hours of hearing of this nonsense, mostly in Pennsylvania. But we don't know if it's happening anywhere else. So we're going to get to that in just a couple of minutes. Also, Chinese interference. How far back does this go? How long have these names actually been out there? We heard earlier this week through a reporter and independent journalist called Sam Cook. I don't think that's his name. The Bureau.news. Sam Shepard, Sam Diamond, Sam something. I forget his last name, but he has been working on getting these names out there to us, these MPs and parliamentarians, senators who have been unwittingly or knowingly influenced by foreign governments like China, India, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, who knows? Who knows? But how long have these names actually been out there? How long have we been yelling and screaming to get these names out there? And it turns out they're already out there. So we're going to get to all of that in just a second, plus more media corruption. It may be unwitting in this case, but I'm going to show it to you anyway. So that's coming up in just a couple of minutes. Welcome to the show tonight. Shadow at Night live stream is brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com. That is CanadaNanoSilver.com. The Immune Gummies simplify your daily immune support with convenient and delicious Nano Silver Immune Gummies. Each serving contains powerful triple action Nano Silver, elderberry, vitamin C, zinc, vitamin D3. It helps supercharge your immune system. The technology, the SilverCeutical technology, is safe and proven. It works alongside your body's immune system to help you stay healthy and strong for everything that life throws at you. I know there is still this weird, wicked virus that's going around out there. A friend of mine out west has had this thing for 3 weeks now. I wonder what it is. Oh, is it that? Is it coming back? Do I have to wear a breathing barrier? A dirty rag on my face to avoid being infected? Or do I just have to keep my immune system healthy and strong? Immune Gummies from CanadaNanoSilver.com. All the other great products available on the website as well. If you're looking for a retail location, you can find one. There's over 30 all across the country to choose from. Just go on the retail locations tab. And if you would like to become a retailer of these awesome products, then get a hold of Kevin and Anna through your contact tab, my friends. It's CanadaNanoSilver.com. So some hellos. Oh, and by the way, before I get into saying hi to everybody watching on all the various platforms, I would like you to take a moment and like the show. I know that already 34 of you at least have liked the show, but that's not enough. That's not enough. As a matter of fact, if you're watching on Facebook tonight, I want you to check and see if you're following this page where the show originates, the Shadow Davis Show page. It's called the Shadow Davis Show. See if you like it. Because sometimes what social media does is they unlike a page on your behalf if you haven't looked at it in a while or for some other reason that we have yet to discern, even though we know what it is for real. So go and check and see if you're following this page on Facebook. And if you're not, please give us a like. That would be cool. And then share this out. Share it out to as many people as you possibly can. Likewise on YouTube, it's smashing the like button. On Twitter or X, it's a heart and a reshare. And on Rumble, you guys know what to do. Hello, Rumble. We're doing good on Rumble tonight. I know Monday night we weren't on Rumble for some reason. I don't know what that was, but we are streaming good there tonight. So thank you. By the way, I uploaded that show, Monday night show, back onto Rumble. So if you're dedicated to Rumble, add a boy, add a girl, that show is back on my page and available on Rumble, Monday night show. I want to thank again last night our guest on the show who came on at, I think, 24 hours notice. He was fantastic. And he'll be coming back on the show. In case you didn't, a lot of people were asking me, well, why would you have an ex-politician on the show, a guy who's famous for gas, buddy? And I said, well, I want to see exactly, because there are some people who are more establishment, let's just say, than other people. And they're a little bit more reticent to talk about the things that you and I talk about on a daily basis. And there are new people out there who want to hear from different voices across the country just to assure themselves they're not insane. And they may have already labeled people like you and me crazy. So they want to hear from different voices. Plus, I wanted to see exactly how much he knew about what was going on in the world. And it turns out he knew plenty. So that was kind of cool having him on last night. If you missed last night's show, I suggest you go back and watch it. Okay, what have we got for you guys first tonight? Let's see here. Oh, hello, Kyle. Hello, Nell. Hello, MC Tile Guy. Watching on Facebook. Gary is watching in Steinbach tonight. Hello, Trent, watching in Lloydminster. Diane. Facebook is bad for unfollowing a page you are following. Absolutely. That's why I asked you guys to check. Hello, Darcy. Thank you for saying great show. I appreciate that. Randy is watching tonight, and Melissa is watching tonight. David, Colleen, Sashida, Karen's watching in Frankfurt, Ontario on YouTube. Hello, Leanne and Anna and Kev from Canada Nano Silver. Sharon and Edna. So yeah, everybody, just make sure you get this out there to as many people as you possibly can. You are helping this show just by liking and sharing. Okay, the first thing tonight I want to show you is a tweet that was repeated by almost every federal liberal politician out there. 153 of them. I don't follow them all. I follow mostly cabinet members, and they all put this out there today, this story from CTV. Patty Hajdu, our former Minister of Health, says, we knew Pierre doesn't listen to economists, scientists, or health experts, and now we know he doesn't even listen to his own caucus. So the story is, and like I said, I mean, I saw this almost exact same tweet from over 30 liberals today, and I laughed, and it was fodder. And it seemed to me that CTV here was simply repeating a liberal talking point with this story. Here it is. A number of conservative MPs have written letters to the Liberal housing minister asking him to grant their communities funding from a program that conservative leader Pierre Poilievre this week called disastrous and promised to cancel. Housing Minister Sean Fraser made the revelation in the House of Commons yesterday while responding to a question from Poilievre. What Poilievre doesn't know, this was this back and forth they had, which was embarrassing. What Poilievre doesn't know is his caucus colleagues have been going behind his back, writing me letters advocating for their communities to receive funding through the Housing Accelerator Fund because they believe it'll get more homes built. So far, 0 homes built, by the way, through the Housing Accelerator Fund. My question for the conservative members of his caucus, will they have the courage to stand up and tell him he is wrong? So what the liberals are trying to do here is make it seem like there's dissent among the conservatives in the House of Commons because they've got their own problems and they're trying to deflect. Fraser said on Wednesday that at least a dozen conservative MPs, 5 actually, have written to his office. And when he was asked by reporters the other day who they were, name names, I don't know. You're going to have to check with my office, but there's at least a dozen of them there. 5. And they want money for their communities to build housing. If that's the way it is, I'm sure they're thinking, then I guess that's what we have to do for now. Makes sense. Could be that they're working along nonpartisan lines. We don't see too much of that these days, but it could be. Who knows? Or it could be that they were working behind Poilievre's back. Who knows? But there's no need to make it a big deal because it's not. When we know the Liberal cabinet, the government is falling apart and the Bloc Québécois is threatening a non-confidence vote anytime. And this is the story that CTV wants to put out there. The Canadian press has reviewed 5 letters. 5! Oh, it's not a dozen, it's 5, sent between September last year and February of this year by Dan Albus, Michael Cooper, Adam Chambers, Leanne Rood, and Rob Moore. The MPs represent ridings. And how is this a story, my friends? Exactly how is this a story? You know, CTV was lambasted in committee a couple of weeks ago. Here's a few seconds of
the producers, the editors, and the journalists all have the same Liberal bias. You have no way to determine that.
Quick response, Mr. Gray, please.
Our team do not have a Liberal bias.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Scheer.
Did you hear the laughter in the background? Let's listen again.
Team do not have a Liberal bias.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Scheer.
Hey, what is Justin Trudeau really like? I mean, we think we know what he's like. We think he's arrogant. We think he's a man-child. We think he's narcissistic. We think all of these things. And that's why he won't call an election because or step down because he feels that he is the only one, the chosen one, to lead us to the promised land and transform Canada into his Marxist playground. Well, Celina Cesar Chavannes was an MP in his caucus a few years ago. Remember, she unceremoniously left the same day, I believe, as Jody Wilson-Raybould. She was interviewed by Dr. Jordan Peterson, and this was put up on YouTube and all the other platforms yesterday, and I took some clips out of it. And here's some interesting stuff.
Principal secretaries, Jerry Butts, Katie Telford, that were primarily running the show. And I don't think I'm the only one that would say this. I would think that, Bill Morneau left, said the same thing. Others have left and said the same thing. So this is not a Celina-ized perspective. This is something that I witnessed and I think is actually true. When it comes to, after the incident with Jody Wilson-Raybould, when Jerry Butts stepped down, I thought he was the only adult in the room. And when he stepped down, it became very apparent that things were going to get a lot worse before it got a lot better. And then I think towards the end, towards especially March of 2019, I just decided that I was not going to let the actions of one person dictate how I left government. And I was not going to let Justin Trudeau continue to be presenting himself as this sunny ways, great politician when I knew that he was the emperor with no clothes on.
So what did you do about that? Like, you had some famous blow-ups as you departed from the political scene.
Yes, yeah. So it didn't start with us, though. I want to be very clear. Leona Alislev left way before. Decorated military person who decided to leave and cross the floor to the Conservatives really early in our mandate because she was so disenfranchised with the prime ministers. Other people left. After we left, Eva Nessef also left because of the bullying that she received within the party. So there was a few people. So it's not just a 3. By the time Jane Philpott, decorated medical professional, left, we were way beyond 3s at that point. So
yes.
Yeah. So there were quite a few. And I would say for me, I didn't have to have a public blow up with the prime minister. When I told him that I was leaving in early March of 2019, I was very clear for all of the reasons that we discussed before, feeling tokenized, not getting the support of the prime minister, just being very much marginalized within a liberal, which is it makes me so. It is so upsetting because it's one thing to say, you did some missteps, but I felt duped by a party that I really thought understood what it meant to be center, understood what it meant to have equity and justice, what it meant to have those things, and to be disenfranchised by them because I wanted more for the people that I serve was
So what she's saying here is that she's actually woke. Equity, right? She is really woke. She believes in all of these principles, but Justin Trudeau does not. That's what she's really saying here. He virtue signals. He's a virtue signaler. He's a liar.
was
Betrayal.
disenfranchising for me.
Mhm.
Yes,
Mhm.
it was.
Yeah, well,
that
definitely.
is the word. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
That is actually the word. Betrayal.
Betrayed.
And so I called the prime minister and I said, look, I'm not running again. I didn't even have to give him a reason. I said, I'm not running again. It's 4 years. I'm not getting a pension. I'm not getting anything. I just don't want to do this. He said, well, that was the same day that Jody Wilson-Raybould had stepped down. He couldn't have two women of color leave at the same day.
That's what he told you.
It's
Really?
like, dude, that's not my problem.
That was his first response.
Yes, that's not all he said. That was the first thing he said. He was not happy with that. He said, oh my God, Celina, I can't believe that you're talking about my privilege. I was like, what? He said, he started talking about the fact that he has, had death threats too, and that, in my mind, I'm going, but you have an RCMP detail. When me and my kids had death threats, I didn't have anybody, right? Like, so there's a lot of stuff missing from this story, Jordan, that I'm not putting out. But he went on and how I needed to appreciate him because he came to the riding during the by-election and how I should be, grateful to him. And I just was like, oh, hell no. And I said a few choice words to him after that, because I lost it at that point. And yeah.
What did you say?
The
What
point
did
of
you
me.
say?
What did you say?
Oh,
What did you tell
said
him?
bad
Well,
words.
you can tone it down. What were you
no.
conveying? Put it that way.
I was conveying that I wanted him to know who did he think he was speaking to. Like, I'm not a child. I'm not someone that he could just reprimand. I'm a colleague. And as a person in a professional capacity, if he had went off the way he did with me on someone else, he would have been taken straight to HR. And that doesn't happen because he has parliamentary privilege. And so he's able to get away with those kinds of things. And I wanted to make him darn sure that he was not going to get away with it with me.
I'll tell you, that guy has been bumping around the House of Commons for the last 9 or 10 years. I'm sure we've all worked with somebody like that, a boss like that, who is just so abusive, probably doesn't even realize it, thinks he's a great guy, but just the worst kind of arrogance and attitude. I've worked with several guys like that in my 35 years in radio, and I have to tell you, man, that it's just gut-wrenching, frustrating, angering, belittling, all of that stuff. And that is exactly who he is, for real. I want to get back to the media for just a second, because Jake Tapper on CNN had a knockdown dragout the other day with JD Vance. And I wish the media up here was more combative like this. They're not. I mean, Vashi Kapelos is probably as close as we get to that. And she's too respectful in my opinion. I mean, letting people, she had Karina Gould, the government House leader, on yesterday or the day before for 20 minutes. And she kept asking the same question over and over. And she wasn't answering Gould. She just wouldn't answer. She kept repeating the same talking point over and over and over. And Vashi just said, okay, let it be known you didn't answer the question. We'll move on. That was it. How unsatisfying is that? But look at this, you guys. This is, I mean, Jake Tapper, for as left wing and indoctrinated as he is, gives JD a good run for his money here. And JD stands up quite well. He actually exposes Tapper as being a Democratic minion. But it's a great fight. Check it out.
What John Kelly accuses Donald Trump of saying. There were other people in the room, Mike Pence's former chief of staff, for example, who've explicitly said Donald Trump never said those things. Why does John Kelly not support Donald Trump? It's about policy. It's actually not about personality.
He says he agrees with Trump on most policy.
No.
He agrees with Trump on most policy.
the
He disagrees
fundamental-
with Trump on how Trump views his role and his and the fascism and the authoritarianism.
I don't buy that, Jake. They want America to police the world, and Donald Trump wasn't.
John
And if
Kelly
you
lost
look
a
at the
son in
policy-
Afghanistan. Why are you saying that he, like, I've never heard John Kelly say whether he
Jake, come on.
supports of Iraq or Afghanistan.
And I honor his son's sacrifice, and I honor his family's sacrifice. That doesn't mean he's not wrong about policy.
You're ascribing worldviews, I think, based on gut. I can't really tell where you're coming from on it. There's no evidence.
Based on people that I've talked to in the Trump administration,
John
about
Bolton-
what John
sure.
Kelly wanted to do, John Bolton, Liz Cheney,
We're
chief's
talking
orders.
about Donald Trump and what he says.
Yes, and
Donald
much-
Trump says.
And you'd much rather talk about what Donald Trump allegedly said
I'm talking about
than
what he
what
said
Donald
publicly.
Trump did in office.
I'm talking about
what he
said
did
publicly.
in office, Jake.
What he said
is
publicly.
1.5%
He wants to use the
inflation.
military to go after the enemy within, which is the American people.
He did not say that, Jake.
The enemy
he
within?
said that he was going to send the military after the American people. Show me the quote where
He said he was going
that.
to. He said the enemy
He
within.
said far left lunatics. He's talking
Like
about
the
people
Pelosi's
rioting.
and Schiff.
He's talking about people rioting after the election. He separately, in a totally different context, in a totally different conversation, said that Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff were threats to this country.
Were the enemy
He
within.
Never
were the
said-
enemy within. He said they were the enemy
So
within.
every time he uses the exact same phrase, we assume that he uses.
I don't
the
know. I don't
military?
throw around the term of enemy within to talk about using the
Well,
military
you're a
against going American
journalist
people.
and you're asking his vice president, but you won't let me answer the question. I'm telling you that Donald Trump has said, and I agree with him, that we should use the U.S. military to
go
go
after Americans.
people who riot, who burn down our cities.
And this was
We
what
should
John
call
Kelly
in the
was.
National Guard.
This was what John Kelly was alarmed by: the idea of using the U.S. military to go after Americans. That's
not,
what he said.
Donald Trump never said Americans writ large. You keep on putting words in his mouth and my
Are they or
mouth.
are they not Americans?
Far left people who commit acts of violence, who riot. And
Now
I
you're
don't
doing a
care.
very narrow definition of
I
what he said,
don't-
which is
I
not what
don't
he
care.
said. Liz Cheney, he said, should be put before a war tribunal. None of that sounds fascist to you at all?
No, of course it doesn't. Of
Putting
course
Liz
it
Cheney
doesn't.
before a military tribunal?
First of all, I don't buy into the premise of what you're saying, Jake, because
things
I just
he said.
on things that
are
I
things
know that
he
he
said.
said, on things that I know that he said, you're imputing things, you're taking words out of context.
It's not like these are conservative.
Absolutely, that's my
These
argument,
are not
Jake.
conservative
All of these
Republicans.
people,
These aren't
all
conservative
of these
Republicans
people,
who are
Jake,
concerned about Donald Trump.
all of
They're not.
these,
That's
all
not
of
right.
These, all of these people, Jake, they came into office thinking that they could control Donald Trump. That when he said he wanted peace in the
Mike
world,
Pence thought he
that
could control Donald
yes,
Trump?
he did. And when he found out, that
Really?
when he found out that he couldn't, they all turned on Donald Trump, and a lot of them got fired. And
Okay.
we're running, and we're trying to staff the government with people who are going to govern according to principles of peace and prosperity.
Let me ask you-
They're pissed off about it.
That's good TV. I'll tell you that right now. We could use more of that in Canada. I wish we had more. I would do it. I absolutely would do it. Of course, I would be coming from the common sense angle, and I wouldn't be saying, listen, your president, your candidate said that we should send the military after Americans or Canadians. It's not what he said. You're conflating two different sentences from two different interviews or two different rallies and combining them, kind of like what CTV did. So how bad is the Chinese interference, and how far back does it go in terms of this round of it? It's been going on for 15 or 20 years, at least that we've known of, or CSIS has known of. As a matter of fact, if you look up Chinese interference these days, your first 4 or 5 Google pages are going to be filled with what's happened in the last year and a half in Canada. But if you go further than that, if you dig deeper than that, page 6, 7, 12, 14, whatever, you'll find stories that go back to 2007, 2008, even 2003 or 4, Chinese interference. And then you talk about liberals who've been involved with China in some intimate or educational way. And it goes back to the late 1960s and the early 1970s. A lot of specifically liberal politicians have very, very deep ties to communist China. I want to play a video for you guys with some footage never before seen that was found by Vesper on X. It's very interesting. Let's watch it.
Never been any information given to me on the funding of federal candidates by China.
Canada's spy agency is warning that China's attempts to manipulate the media are becoming the new normal. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service raised that issue in a meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau earlier this year, and there are renewed calls now for a much tougher approach to foreign interference.
Trudeau did not address reporting by Global News that sources say a clandestine election interference network was covertly funded by Chinese state entities in the 2019 federal election, and that the Prime Minister was briefed in 2022 by Canadian intelligence officials on these stunning allegations of political interference schemes. Canada's chief electoral officer says he's not aware of Beijing interfering beyond Global News reports.
I've not received any reports regarding specific instances of non-compliance with the legislation or specific instances of Chinese interference in the election.
MLI Senior Fellow J. Michael Cole warns that Ottawa also needs to contend with the possibility of interference by Beijing. The Chinese regime has every reason to regard the upcoming elections as an opportunity and to engineer the election of a future government that is more to its liking. The Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, has a variety of tools at its disposal, honed by experience in other jurisdictions such as Taiwan. For example, it could escalate its economic warfare against Canada by targeting sectors of the economy and export-reliant parts of the country with the aim of alienating those ridings from the current government.
I woke up to an explosive report in the Globe and Mail this morning reporting that CSIS documents viewed by the newspaper reveal China's strategy to influence the 2021 election. Beijing wanted the Liberals to be elected, but only to a minority mandate. And according to the documents, China viewed the Conservatives as too harsh on China and used disinformation campaigns against them. Alleged Chinese government election interference is rattling Canadian politics. A string of media reports based on leaked intelligence reveals both the 2019 and 2021 elections were targeted. Senior government officials are adamant the integrity of those elections were not compromised. The allegations, though, are alarming, and my next guest says they're just the tip of the iceberg. Chuck Kwan is co-chair of the Toronto Association for Democracy in China. He joins us now from Toronto. Mr. Kwan, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
What can you tell us about how Beijing runs foreign interference operations in Canada?
Well, it all started about 34 years ago after Tiananmen Square massacre, when Beijing was eager to burnish its image internationally. And they have started setting up what I would call proxy organizations. And through these organizations and through their proxies, Beijing has been able to exert very soft influence in many ways, in many levels of our governments.
Is that the primary focus, or do these operations primarily target Chinese Canadians?
No, they are targeted at Canadian society at large.
How concerned are you about how the government hasn't done enough, or do you believe the government hasn't done enough?
And we can go from website and see who's who and who's meeting whom, and that includes a lot of Canadian politicians and government officials being wine and dined.
So help me understand this, because the allegation right now, the headline story right now, certainly in the Globe and Mail, was that China wanted to help elect liberals to get a liberal minority government, and they wanted to defeat conservatives who they believed had policies that were unfavorable to China. In your experience on monitoring this, is it that starkly partisan? Is China, in your view, interested in electing liberals at the expense of conservatives?
They understand that perhaps from the Harper days, the conservatives are a little bit tougher on them than the liberals would, and that's why in the last 10, 12 years they have been pretty much putting the money on the liberals. Certainly they are the beneficiary of the Chinese operation.
Given the large number of accredited Chinese diplomats in Canada, we can assume Beijing has thoroughly studied potential vulnerabilities. Likewise, candidates who hew closer to Beijing's line might be promised greater Chinese investment in their ridings. Additionally,
Guys, I want you to know that this guy here talking, Brian Lee Crowley. He is the director and founder of the MacDonald Laurier Institute. And this goes back, as the big red arrow shows us there, to July of 2019. It's over 5 years ago.
The Communist Party of China may rely on its various proxies in the business community, political donors, captured elites in academia, think tanks, and retired government officials, as well as communities with large concentrations of ethnic Chinese, to undermine the electoral prospects of politicians seeking election.
Separate sources with knowledge of the 2022 intelligence briefs told Global News funds from the Chinese consulate in Toronto, allegedly facilitated by a Toronto businessman, Wei Cheng-yi, totaling some $250,000, was transferred first to an unnamed Ontario MPP and a federal candidate's staff member. Wei Cheng-yi denies the allegations. From there, sources say the money was distributed to members of a clandestine network. Intelligence says the network was comprised of at least 11 federal candidates, along with 13 campaign staffers.
The Communist Party of China also enjoys near total control of Chinese language media in Canada. Adding to the rampant disinformation being circulated on social media apps, the regime has perfected the practice of discrediting politicians over many years in Taiwan and Hong Kong. And the CCP's content farms are known to spread dis- and misinformation, cause confusion, and embattle a targeted government by forcing it to dedicate large amounts of resources to debunking false claims.
Canada's spy agency is warning that China's attempts to manipulate the media are becoming the new normal. The Canadian Security Intelligence Service raised that issue in a meeting with Prime Minister Trudeau earlier this year, and there are renewed calls now for a much tougher approach to foreign interference. Catherine Tunney reports.
Foreign interference is becoming more sophisticated, frequent, and insidious. That's the warning the head of Canada's spy agency gave to the Prime Minister during a meeting earlier this year. According to briefing docs prepped ahead of that meeting, CSIS warned the Prime Minister that foreign states were trying to influence media to get their message out. In particular, the People's Republic of China's media influence activities in Canada have become normalized. Chinese language media outlets operating in Canada and members of the Chinese Canadian community are primary targets of PRC-directed foreign influenced activities.
Cyber attacks against political parties, local governments, Election Canada websites, and other critical sectors can also be used as a means to interfere with elections and, as with disinformation, erode public confidence in the integrity of an election. And we cannot rule out the possibility that the Communist Party of China will seek to buy outright certain candidates with promises of money or lucrative deals at some point in the future. Finally, in the case of the Liberal Party, former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien's recent proposal to visit Beijing and negotiate a deal with Communist Party officials, an idea that would ensure the future capture of Canadian nationals whenever Beijing entered into a dispute with Ottawa, illustrates the potential for a serious split within the party, which could be exploited by Beijing. Every effort must be made by our intelligence and law enforcement agencies, by the judiciary, and by other government agencies to track suspected foreign interference and implement appropriate defensive measures.
So we have had ample time to have an honest discussion, which I think is not, people are not prepared to have. It is also why people are resisting a foreign agent registry, because of the number of Canadian elites that would get ensnarled in such a registry. These are very serious matters in a parliamentary democracy, and there are many options available to the government today if it wants to show that it is serious about defending Canadian democracy. We need to decide, are we standing with the tyrants or are we standing up for Canadian democracy?
There has never been any information given to me on the funding of federal candidates by China.
And I'm sure that's only the tip of the iceberg. I'm sure there's so much stuff that we are not hearing and probably will never hear. And Justin Trudeau has politicized it all. He's politicized it all. He keeps talking about Pierre Poilievre getting this so-called accreditation, this so-called high-end security clearance so he can see the names on the list when he doesn't need it because he's already got it as a member of the Privy Council. What he needs to do is sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, so that he can't talk about who's on the list. But he did say today that he's pledged to release the names of the MPs involved in foreign interference if elected. So that's something cool, I suppose. Now, it's not just in Canada where this Chinese influence is pervasive. Apparently, it's in the United States as well. This story was broken by a British publication on Monday. Daughter of powerful Chinese communist officials revealed Tim Walz, Tampon Timmy. I'm sorry, I chuckle every time I hear that. Had a secret sexual relationship with her. So here's a photo. I suppose that's Tampon Timmy there. And we're going back like 30 years here, so maybe even longer. So I'm not sure who's where in this picture. But this article originally appeared in the Gateway Pundit. An explosive report reveals Tampon Tim Walz's ties to China ran so deep he was having romantic relationships with powerful communist officials' family members. The Daily Mail dropped a bombshell on Monday afternoon, revealing the Minnesota governor had a secret affair with the daughter of a high-ranking communist official during his 1989 teaching stint in China. The woman who converted, I don't think that's the word they want to use here, but anyway, we'll go with it. With Walz, explained what happened to them in graphic detail. 59-year-old Jenna Wang told the outlet Walz seduced her with gifts while at a #1 high school in Foshan, Gundong province. At the time, Wang was an English language teacher at #8 middle school, while Walz was on the staff of the nonprofit World Teach in China. Tim was very handsome. I loved his eyes and his big mouth. This sounds kind of like a parody article, but if it was in the Daily Mail, I don't know. It could be, too, his eyes and his big mouth. We talked afterwards, and he was very complimentary about my English. I don't know. We do know that there are stories of elected American officials sleeping with Chinese spies. We know that. We also know that China has very close ties to the World Economic Forum. They host a summer version of Davos in China each and every year. And here's an interesting article that I got from 2 years ago. China's grand plan to take over the world. We've all heard about the 100-year plan, I'm sure, by now. So could it be, and this is something I've been talking about kind of off and on for the past few months, could it be that the World Economic Forum and China are working together, and all of this, everything that we're seeing right now, all of this upside down world is being caused by China, and all of this influence they're putting on our government, our elected officials, and our everything, really? I mean, it's not just, governments, it's institutions, it's everything, it's corporations. The woke nonsense, could that be China's hand in this? When the US and ultimately the rest of the Western world began to engage China, resulting in China finally being allowed into the World Trade Organization in the early 2000s, no one really expected the outcomes that we see today. There's no simple disengagement path given this. I've been wondering, why can't we just get rid of all of these people who are causing so many problems? I mean, I'm not talking about the actual people who just want to be here. I'm talking about the ones who are connected to the Communist Party. But they say here there's no simple disengagement path given the scope of economic and legal entanglements. This isn't a trade we can simply walk away from. But it's also one that, if allowed to continue in its current form, could lead to a loss of personal freedom for Western civilization. It really is that much of an existential question. Doing nothing isn't an especially good option because, like it or not, the world is becoming something quite different than we expected just a few years ago, not just technologically, but geopolitically and socially. Let's see how we got here. Oh, the guy who wrote this again? John Malden, president of Malden Economics. All right, so how we got here. My generation came of age during the Cold War. China was a huge, impoverished odd duck in those days. In the late 1970s, China began slowly opening to the West. Change unfolded gradually, but by the 1990s, serious people wanted to bring China into the modern world, and China wanted to join it. Understand that China's total GDP in 1980 was under 90 billion in current dollars. Today, it's over 12 trillion. The world has never seen such an enormous economic growth in such a short period of time. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union collapsed and the internet was born. The U.S. was the sole superpower. It saw opportunities everywhere. American businesses shifted production to lower-cost countries. Thus came the incredible extension of globalization. We in the Western world thought, somewhat arrogantly in hindsight, everyone else wanted to be like us. Made sense. Our ideas, freedom, technology had won both World War II and the Cold War that followed. Obviously, our ways were the best. But that wasn't obvious to people elsewhere, most notably China. Leaders in Beijing may have admired our accomplishments, but not enough to abandon communism. They merely adapted and rebranded it. We perceived a bigger change than there actually was. Today, Chinese communists are nowhere near Mao's kind of communism. Xi calls it socialism with a Chinese character. It appears to be a dynamic capitalistic market, but it's also a totalitarian top-down structure with rigid rules and social restrictions. So here we are. Our economy now hardwired with an autocratic regime that has no interest in becoming like us. In the 100-year marathon, Michael Pillsbury marshals a lot of evidence showing the Chinese government has a detailed strategy to overtake the U.S. as the world's dominant power. They want to do this by 2049. (2049, 2050), right? The centennial of China's communist revolution. The strategy has been well documented in Chinese literature, published and sanctioned by organizations of the People's Liberation Army for well over 50 years. And just as we have hawks and moderates on China within the U.S., there are hawks and moderates within China about how to engage the West. Unfortunately, the hawks are ascendant, embodied mostly in Xi Jinping, the chairman. Xi's vision of the Chinese Communist Party controlling the state and eventually influencing and even controlling the rest of the world is clear. These are not merely words for the consumption of the masses. They're instructions to party members. Grand dreams of world domination are part and parcel of the communist ideologies going all the way back to Karl Marx. For the Chinese, this blends with the country's own long history. It isn't always clear to Western minds whether they actually believe the rhetoric or simply use it to keep the peasantry in line. Pillsbury says Xi Jinping really sees this as China's destiny and himself is the leader who will deliver it. To that end, the Chinese manipulated Western politicians and business leaders into thinking China was evolving towards democracy and capitalism. In fact, the intent was to acquire our capital, technology, and other resources for use in China's own modernization, and it worked. Over the last 20 or 30 years, we've equipped the Chinese with almost everything they need to match us, technologically and otherwise. Hundreds of billions of Western dollars have been spent developing China and its state-owned businesses. Sometimes this happens voluntarily, as companies gave away trade secrets in the often futile hope it would let them access China's huge market. Other times, it was outright theft. In other cases, there was no accident, but part of a long-term plan. Pillsbury, who, by the way, advises the White House, including the president himself, thinks the clash is intensifying because President Trump's China skepticism is disrupting the Chinese plan. They see his talk of restoring America's greatness as an affront to their own dreams. In any case, we've reached a crossroads. What do we do about China now? In crafting a response, the first step is to define the problem correctly and specifically. We hear a lot about China cheating on trade deals and taking jobs from Americans. That's not entirely wrong, but it's not the main challenge. I believe in free trade. I think David Ricardo was right about comparative advantage. Every nation is better off if all specialize in whatever they do best. However, free trade doesn't mean nations need to arm their potential adversaries. Nowadays, military superiority is less about factories and shipyards than high-tech weapons and cyber warfare. Much of our peaceful technology is easily weaponized. This means our response has to be narrowly targeted at specific companies and products. Broad-based tariffs are the opposite of what we should be doing, this guy says. Ditto for capital controls. They are blunt instruments that may feel good to swing, but they hurt the wrong people and may not accomplish what we want. We should not be using the blunt tool of tariffs to fight a trade deficit that's actually necessary. The Chinese are not paying our tariffs. U.S. consumers are. Importing T-shirts and sneakers from China doesn't threaten our national security. Let that kind of trade continue unmolested and work instead of protecting our advantages in quantum computing, artificial intelligence, autonomous drones, and so on. The Trump administration appears to finally be getting this. They're clearly seeking ways to pull back the various tariffs and ramping up other efforts. Of course, Trump is actually campaigning on imposing tariffs, and he even mentioned the other day that maybe they could get rid of all of the income taxes and replace it with the money gained from tariffs. Trump says he made China pay before billions, trillions of dollars. Can he do it again? Who can get China out of our business? Because that's not cool. And are the Chinese involved in all of this election interference that we're hearing about? The latest round in the United States. Now, pre-polling is on in some states down there. The presidential election is next week. It's early next week. It's Tuesday. And this whole story, this whole election interference story started yesterday with a woman called Val Bianchiello, who is a GOP representative in Pennsylvania. And she was arrested by police yesterday merely for telling people to stay in line to vote. They were trying to tell people to go home and come back tomorrow to vote because they have to wrap it up, even though the polls weren't set to close for 2.5 hours at the time she was arrested. And here's video of that.
Wow. 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 That's crazy. You locked her up? That is insane, man. She is not influencing people. She is not at all.
All she did, and I watched more video of that from what happened before and what happened after. All she did was encourage people to stay in line and cast their vote. There's more. Watch this.
It's 2:41, and they are ending the line.
So they ended the line, even though voting was supposed to continue until 4:30 that afternoon. And here's another one.
Let me explain it to you.
Please.
Okay. This process is very slow and grueling.
That doesn't matter if we're online.
Very slow and grueling.
Doesn't matter if we're online by 4:30. We have the right to
The reason why it
vote.
had to close was because a high volume of people wanted to do this. Slow and grueling.
Well, then they
So
have to
had
wait till everyone's.
They had to cut the line at 1:45.
They cut the line at 1:45.
1:45.
You hear that, everyone? They cut the line at 1:45.
Here's your. here's
This
the form
is
right here.
voter fraud, by the way. Who?
No, it's
who are
not.
You? Yes, it is. Oh, voter protection. I heard about that on.
Okay, so this is interesting. Apparently, this woman is a Democrat operative masquerading as a voter safety employee or volunteer. Now, I can't verify this. We're going to go and check this out in just a couple of minutes, but let's continue on.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Contact
Voter protection. Let's see what
Contact the county commissioners to complain.
This is, and so you don't think this is voter fraud? This is voter fraud.
Oh, very interesting. So let's go back a little bit in this video here and get that woman's face. All right, there she is. Get a good look at her face. I know she's wearing shades, but get a good look at her face. You got it? Okay, so let's go to this story here. Posted by a guy called Larry. Now, I don't know this to be true, and I'm terrible when it comes to saying, hey, that's the same person as that. So maybe you guys can go ahead and say yes or no, because you're better at that than I am. But Larry says, in case anyone was wondering, the voter protection official telling everyone they can't vote is Democrat official Pam Janvey. She works for Pennsylvania Democrats, not legal poll watchers. Paid for by the Pennsylvania Democratic Party and not authorized by any candidate or candidate committee. Is this here the same person as this? Can you guys, I'm going to leave that up on the screen for a few seconds. It doesn't look the same to me, but then again, we can't see her eyes. Looks kind of like the same hairdo. I don't know. Maybe there's some better pictures in the comments here. Oh, here's Pam Janvey bragging about how she got her COVID vaccine. And the disinformation is deadly. Looks a lot like the same lady taking Trump signs down, replacing them with Kamala signs. Bucks, Pennsylvania woman driving around taking down Trump. Here's an interesting one. Kellyanne says, I told the poll monitor she's going to jail for election fraud. Let's watch.
Just so you know, that's election fraud and you will go to jail. A poll monitor is not a thing. Election fraud. Yeah, you smoking in the purple. I hope you look good in orange, because that's what you'll be wearing. You're a coward.
All right, so obviously the Democrats are saying, well, Trump is already claiming election fraud. He's setting the stage. He's setting the stage. Here's video from a Trump rally today from the chair of the GOP.
A lot of you today have seen these videos of people being turned away at the polls in places like Delaware County and Bucks County. And last night we even saw one of our great local leaders, Val Biancaniello, arrested at the polls for telling people to stay in line. All she was doing was telling folks, stay and vote. They took her away in handcuffs. Folks, here's what's happening. Democrat election officials are seeing our numbers. They're seeing our turnout. They are seeing us breaking early vote records across Pennsylvania. They are terrified, and they want to stop our momentum. We are not going to let them suppress our votes. We are going to fight. I'm proud tonight to tell you that the Trump-Vance campaign has just filed a huge lawsuit against Bucks County for turning away our voters. We are going to fight this thing in court, and all we ask of you is to stay in line. Donald Trump needs your votes. Donald Trump needs Pennsylvania, and America needs Pennsylvania. We are going to swamp the vote, and we are not going to let the Democrats stop us. 9 years ago.
All right, 9 years ago. Do you think it's possible? I'm going to go to the comments for a second. We've got a few minutes left here. Do you think it's possible that the Democrats are actually doing this so obviously? Or is it just people who are hypersensitive to the possibility of voter fraud that they're reacting on a hair trigger? Now, there's one cop that says, well, this is a long, grueling process. Well, so what? You said the polls were going to be open until 4:30, and now you're telling me you're closing them at 1:45 or 2:30 or 3 o'clock. For what reason? Well, people, it's a long, grueling process. Huh? The polls are supposed to stay open until you say they stay open. It said in the email that I got today, that the polls are open till 4:30. So I showed up at 3 o'clock because I knew there was going to be long lines. And you're telling me now that you've shut the polls down already? I can't vote today? And there are select pre-voting days as well. Are they doing it this obviously? Well, I think that it's possible. And the reason for that is simply that if you claim election fraud, you're still going to have to verify a winning candidate, right? And then you got to take it to court. And the process goes on for 2 or 3 years. And the Democrats know this. You can cheat with impunity and never, ever have to pay the price. And what do you say during the time that all of these cases are going to court? What are you saying? Oh, well, they're just lying about election fraud. As a matter of fact, we're going to go after them for tampering with the results of an election, just like they did last time. And we always overlook Canada. But provincial elections have been using these voting machines, these voting tabulators, not necessarily machines. People are still using pencil and paper to write down their choices for who they want to see elected, and then it goes into a tabulator. In BC, it seemed to me these results were a little bit hinky. But in Canada, if you say, hey, man, that's election fraud, you are looked at, even by people who are on our side, as a kook. Are they manipulating elections in Canada too? Well, with all this Chinese interference, who knows what's really going on? And there are more than one way to skin a cat. I'm sorry to use that expression, but there are. I mean, you can influence people online. You can influence people through threats like the Chinese Communist Party appears to do with Chinese nationals living in Canada. There's all kinds of different ways. Media to influence an election. And we see it up here, but we don't say much about it. But down there, those people are far more outspoken. They're trying to save their country. And I wish there was more of us trying to save ours. We'll be at the Howden Community Center this weekend for another Winnipeg Metropolitan Region 2050 Plan information session. Ken Lee, Ken Drysdale, and myself in Howden, Manitoba. This is just south of the city, Howden Community Center, between 1 and 4 on Saturday afternoon. Hopefully you guys will be coming. I'm going to say something that you might not like too much because it's not all that positive. Shadow, you got to be more positive. People tell me, and I say, well, look, I'm just sitting here trying to tell you the truth. The turnout we had in LaSalle last weekend wasn't exactly impressive. It wasn't tiny, but it wasn't as large as the Selkirk or Stonewall presentations we did earlier. And what we're talking about here is a globalist entity entering local communities and trying to take what you've worked for your entire life. Ultimately, that's the chain here. That's what's going on. We've seen Edmonton approve, their city council has approved the 15-minute city plan there. We have seen Vancouver proposing and close to approving a 17-village plan. Winnipeg, Montreal, Toronto, they're all captured. All of these municipalities that they brag about, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities or the Canadian Federation of Municipalities, whatever, 400 of them, 400 are captured by the Partners for Climate Protection, which is ICLEI Canada, which is a branch of the United Nations. And when you read these plans, no matter what municipality they exist in, and what they're called. It could be a smart city. It could be a healthy city. It could be the 15-minute city, whatever. All of the plans are remarkably similar, if not exactly the same. And they all include the language of the United Nations. And I'm wondering why that is. Not really, but you understand what I'm saying. Also, they all seem to have a deadline. They're all rolling out at the same time. Why? Have you ever seen such coordination between cities in your life? Dan McTeague talked about the Canadian Federation of Municipalities last night on the show. He's more aware of what's going on than I thought he was. And of course, the Partners for Climate Protection, ICLEI Canada, the United Nations. So if you live south of Winnipeg or in one of those, any one of the 18 municipalities, including the city of Winnipeg, we invite you, we urge you to show up at the Howden Community Center on Saturday afternoon between 1 and 4 and bring at least one friend or family member. We want to fill that place up. We want to tell you exactly what's at stake and how you can fight back against it. One last story before we move to the all access part of the show tonight, the extension on shadowdavis.com. So if you are a member, by the way, I spent up till 3 hours, maybe 4 hours last night trying to repair that website. So I'm certainly hoping that everybody has got access now and nobody is being turned away. That is very important to me. Very, very important to me. You guys are supporting this show, and I want to make sure you're taken care of, all you all access members at shadowdavis.com. I wonder if Trudeau is going to say anything about this. Probably not, because Montreal is an incredibly important city for him, and he can't afford to lose any more seats. He's going to get destroyed in the next election, but Montreal, they've been saying for years, a liberal stronghold, even though they lost a by-election there to the Bloc Québécois just about 2 months ago, and in Toronto, obviously, back in June. Montreal City Hall to remove welcome sign featuring woman in hijab. Huh? That's racist. It's racist. A depiction of a woman in a hijab as part of a welcome sign at Montreal City Hall will be removed amid public backlash, and in response to criticism, the image is at odds with Quebec's commitment to secularism. The recently renovated City Hall featured a welcome sign in the lobby with a drawing of 3 individuals, 2 men and a woman in a hijab. The pencil-style sketch said, "Welcome to Montreal City Hall," written in French above them. Montreal Mayor, who's not running again, by the way, Valérie Plante, told Radio Canada during an interview on Sunday the decision to remove the image was made in response to the discomfort it causes, and also because institutions should remain secular. I think we can talk about diversity, the great cultural wealth of Montreal, while favoring secularism, and I tend to agree, separation of church and state. But you know that the Marxists out there are going to hate every single bit of that. But what's Trudeau going to say? He's not going to say a thing, because Montreal, like I said, is far, far too important to him to start screwing with them and risk the possibility of losing even more seats in the next election, whenever that happens to be. The Bloc is threatening to vote non-confidence. We know what the Conservatives are going to do. This could be coming anytime soon, or there could be a prorogation. But definitely an election is coming. I don't think it's happening before Christmas, guys. Sorry to tell you. That's my opinion. I think probably early next year. That's it for social media tonight. We'll continue with the extension on shadowdavis.com in just a couple of minutes. I love you all. I appreciate you all. And I will see you tomorrow night at 8 o'clock Central. Bye for now. All access. I will see you in 2 minutes, and on Telegram. Be right back.